the first boat I built in the basement was the first Bris. I started in midsummer 1971 in the evening. I asked my mother if I couldn't build a boat in the garden, in the backyard. But the town planner turned up and asked if I had permission. And I said, well, we live in a free country. You don't need a permission to build a boat. And he said, what would happen if everyone built a boat in the backyard? So I asked him, what happened if everyone was a town planner in Göteborg? So he got angry.
My guest today is Sven Yrvind. Sven is a Swedish sailor, boat builder, and writer who spent the better part of his life crossing oceans in small boats he built himself. He built his first boat, Bris, in his mother's basement, only to discover that it was too wide to get out. He figured out how to extract it with a favor and a pound of coffee. In 1980, he sailed another of his boats solo around Cape Horn in winter. It was the smallest boat ever to do so. When we spoke, Sven was 86 years old and building his next boat. Sven's philosophy is simple. A bigger boat doesn't make you happier, but the ocean does. Here's Sven Yrvind.
When my mother got home from work, I told her about that man. Then she said, Sven, build a boat in the basement instead. And then in the spring, we dig a canal out into the backyard, and then take it out that way. So I built it cold-molded. And at that time, we didn't have epoxy. So the glue was phenolic glue, and it was not gap-filling. So it has to be very precise. But I built it and took it out,
How long was Bris?
20 feet, like 6 meters.
And how wide?
It was narrow, 1.7 meter, it's less than 6 feet.
Yeah. How did you take it out? Did it fit through the door?
There was the door frame. It was inside. Had to take down the door frame, and there was down steps up, to the level, and we have to take the steps out, and then we drag it out. And then finally, and then I rigged it, and then I started sailing south, to Brazil and Argentina, and then I thought this is Cape Horn, and then I'm out in the Pacific,
So take me back to when you first left. Did you have crew? Were you alone? What time of year was it?
I sailed down Denmark, Germany, Holland. But there was some problems with the boat because, I didn't use epoxy because we didn't have it. So I have a centerboard on it, and it started leaking there. And it was kind of top-heavy too. So I thought, must do something about it. And when in Holland, I met a girl. And we kind of liked each other, and then I went back to Sweden to borrow a car and a trailer to get it back. And then when I thought, when I'm down there in Holland, I look her up. But she was gone, I asked her friends, no one knew where she was. Well, that was a bummer. So I drove back by myself, and I thought that was sad. But then when I came back with the boat and the trailer and the car I borrowed in the garden, and opened the door to my mother's house, and there she was.
She was chasing you, and you were chasing her. That's great.
Exactly. And then...
what was her name?
Jannike. She was called Jannike.
Jannike. So she's at the house. You're there. And then she wants to go sailing with you? And then what happened?
Yes, she knew nothing about sailing, So it was she kind of a strange girl, just liking me means you have to be kind of strange. So we decided it's going to. So we decided was sail up north of the Swedish west coast to Norway, then out between set. But then just sailing between Sweden and Norway, just was a fjord, up going to. And she got so terrible seasick,
No.
Yes,
no.
I said, this won't work out, So I said, we have to leave her, But anyway, and that was a good thing, because I
So
sailed
she stayed in Norway, and you continued.
I left her there, and she went back to Holland. And then
you kept sailing.
I sailed out between, I crossed the North Sea, and it was very flat. And then Orkney and Shetland, I passed out into Atlantic there.
Very far north. So you were sailing quite a bit north. And where were you headed? Where did you want to go ultimately?
Down to Madeira.
Wow. So why did you go north to go to Madeira, which is kind of south?
Well, I tell you, you see, the English Channel is not a good place for sailing. There's a lot of headwinds, and there's lots of traffic, and there's a lot of expensive harbor there. And I'm come from a sailing family. And my grandfather, he sailed on the square riggers. And he said, when we sailed out, we always sailed north of Scotland. When we came back, we sailed through the English Channel. And, you got sea room up there, Right. And if the wind comes that, you can go in a good direction. But in the English Channel, it's kind of narrow. There's a lot of traffic. And it's kind of shallow water there too. So seas are breaking and it's foggy. It's not a good place to go. The current is against you, and the wind is against you.
Just trying to understand this, because this is incredible. Sven, you sailed north up towards Iceland, really.
Exactly. You see, and I met a lot of headwinds. So every time I got a headwind, I tacked westward.
Right.
And they keep going weeks after week, and it was difficult to sort. But this was 1973, so I was much younger, like 35 or something like this. I knew the wind and the current was against me, so I have to drive her hard to get there. And there was a bit of banging, and it was week after week after week, it was kind of tiring, But that's it. I thought because the first time I went down to Holland and I went back and kind of run out of money, as always, And so, well, you just have to do it, Just like a soldier, just 1 hour at a time,
Sven and his 20-foot boat are way up in the North Atlantic Ocean. Like they're just off Iceland. And that is a brutally stormy part of the Atlantic Ocean. So every couple of days, you could have these big gales coming to 35, 40 knots of wind, just blasting Sven and Bris as they're trying to get to Madeira by actually sailing way far north so they can get aligned right with the trade winds that they can then follow down to Madeira. So here's how Sven dealt with those big North Atlantic gales in his little 20-foot, 6-foot wide Bris.
One day the boat was hit, and when I looked up, the log one had made one turn around the whole boat,
The log line was wrapped around the boat?
Yeah.
She would have rolled 360 degrees for that to happen. These North Atlantic gales, would you be lying in your berth when you have 35, 40 knots? Would you be down below on the floor?
Yeah,
I'm
always in my berth reading, or sleeping. There's two positions, reading or sleeping, and of course a bit of eating and look out sometimes and things like this.
So what did you eat in those gales? What did you provision before you left?
Meatballs, because...
Meatballs at sea?
Yeah, it was like... I had very little money to buy food. And food shop did catch fire, and I was selling out all these burnt meatballs tins, tinned. They don't have that anymore, I think, because that was 1970s, early 1970s, So that's
So you
what
lived off burned meatballs for like months at sea.
but I got thinner and thinner, So when I got to
I bet you
Madeira,
did.
very thin.
This is the 1970s. There's no autopilot. There's no wind vane. I have always wondered, Sven, how did you get Bris to steer herself without being at the helm the whole time?
Well, to windward is kind of easy, but going downwind is very difficult. It's kind of, when the wind comes in, the boat kind of heels over, and the center of effort moves outward. The boat moves up into the wind. But then the wind, you have to balance it, you have to trim the sails so that the wind leaves the sails. And that decreases the pressure on the sails. So the boat don't heel so much. And when it's not heeling so much, it falls off. So it's kind of oscillating movements. But the oscillation is so smooth, and it's like a clock,
So how do you do that going downwind, which is very hard to self-steer?
Yes, that's the more difficult thing, And then you have to sheeted the jib flat. Have the mainsail out. And I think, apparent wind. You heard about that?
Yes, sure. In sailing, apparent wind is wind flow created by the sailboat moving through the water. It's like when you run on a calm day and you feel a breeze running over you. And whatever direction you run, it feels like there's a breeze coming straight at you. That's apparent wind.
So when you go straight downwind, the apparent wind is very little. So the boat started going up into the wind, and the apparent wind increases. So the speed of the boat increases. But as the speed of the boat increases, so does the rudder forces increase. So your rudder force increases more and increases with the square of the speed. So if you balance it very good, it brings it back.
You've left Sweden, you go almost up to Iceland, and then you turn south and head to Madeira.
After 45 days, I come to Madeira. But then Jannike came back with airplane.
Oh, did you know she was coming?
No, it's kind of a surprise, And then, we said, let's try to see from Madeira to Canal Island. It's not that far, like 3 days maybe. So that's probably okay, And if that works, we go for Brazil. And she didn't get seasick, to my surprise. And then, so we was down there in the Canary Islands. And then we said, okay, we stocked up with food and everything, and we started sailing. And then as soon as she got up, she got so seasick.
No.
And I think, she just must have used iron will, to fight off this seasick. And then she didn't eat anything for 1 day, 2 days. She didn't eat. She didn't eat for 1 week. She didn't eat for 2 weeks. She didn't eat for 3 weeks. And finally she fainted. I didn't know what to do.
At sea, you're in the middle of the ocean. You're 3 weeks
and she
from
didn't eat, And she fainted. I dragged her into the bunk. But slowly she came around, And slowly she could live a little bit, I
was going to ask you one real quick question about the Doldrums. Explain that. What was your experience like in the Doldrums? Heading there.
Tell you one interesting thing. I've been, 4 times across the Doldrums? And with this boat, the first Bris, 73, I had northeast trades. And then one day, the sails, the wind was coming from the front. The sails were backing. So I sheeted it around, and then I was in the southeast trades. There was nothing.
Because a lot of times people get stuck in the doldrums for weeks.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. Next boat, the aluminium boat. I was there 1 month in the doldrums.
Wow, a month in the doldrums. What was that like? What did you do every day?
Well, at that time I had a French girl with me. And
can you tell me what you did?
But it was very nice and very warm, and in the daytime it was very warm, But we just swim a lot and eat a lot, and things like this. And I kind of like it, except that it was very warm, I'm maybe like you, I'm not in a hurry.
I'm not in a hurry, Sven.
No, I think the doldrums, it's a pain for people and calm, who are in a hurry. But if you're not in a hurry, everything is so fine.
Sven wasn't in a hurry. He and Jannike and Bris crossed the doldrums and sailed out the other side. Everything, to quote Sven, was fine. But then he noticed this funny feeling in his scalp.
Well, yeah, it started kind of itching here in the head, and I found like a little lice, So I asked Jannike, it kind of itching here. Isn't it itching on you? No, she says, I know nothing. Oh, okay, so it can come more and more. And next day I asked her, no, it's nothing there, And then, maybe, I don't know how long time, after a few days, I looked into her, and there was millions of little lice there,
Oh, no! You guys got lice.
They have little eggs,
Yeah.
And they glue these eggs on the hairs. They don't fall out. That's how they live, I think we got it on a bus, on the Canary Islands, somehow.
There's a beautiful passage in your book. You wrote, "We had now settled down to life at sea. Land and civilization seemed far, far away. After 2 weeks, we felt like the dregs of society had settled. Life was concrete and present. The horizon of time was not longer than yesterday and tomorrow. Here in the trade winds, history seemed to have stopped." It's a beautiful passage, man.
Yes, I think this is what I like, like takes about 1 week, and the body gets used to different muscles and things like that. But after a month, the mind is clear, all these things floating around, there. It's like a filter, it's clear. And like I said, it's just like yesterday and tomorrow, and then you just live between them.
So when you're at sea like that, describe your spirituality.
Oh, just so much more. No, I don't think I have any spirituality, No, I'm just thinking about. I'm very interested in thinking about everything, all kinds of problems, It can be mathematics, it can be physiology, how the body works, how the stars works, and it can be my inventions, I did I tell you I invented the smallest sextant?
Tell me about that, because I want to talk about celestial navigation, but tell me about your sextant. It's, if memory serves, Sven, it's like a prism, am I correct?
It's not bigger than a nail, it's like this big, very small, just 3 grams. Sailors usually have the noon sights, but you could also have a fixed angle like 1 hour before noon and 1 hour afternoon. 1 hour afternoon. And that way you got 2 lines of position. And with 2 lines of position, you get a fix.
Wow. So let me understand this, and this makes sense. If you can find at noon shot, you're looking for the highest spot where the sun is. But with your sextant, you're taking 2 sites before noon and afternoon, and then you're crossing those lines of position,
And you get a fix.
and you have 2, because you need 2 lines to have a fix. With your noon shot, you only get 1 line.
Because,
wow, I've always wondered how that worked.
I tell you something more. And if it's with a fixed angle sextant, you can see, you look through there, and you see how the sun comes up, and it's getting closer and closer to the horizon. It's a bit below the horizon, and just as it touches the horizon, you time it. And then it goes over, and then pass in the highest point, and then come back, and then you're ready for it and take it there. But you see, with my sextant, it's not just, I have 3 glasses in it. So it's, and you get the double refraction, and you get the quadruple refractions. You got 3 bright suns there, and you got 5 dim suns. So and also you can take the upper limb of the sun, the lower limb of the sun, and get the lower. And you have the same in the morning and the same in the evening. So you got 48 possibilities with my sextant. But you see, the real secret is this. There is 3 things connected. It's the height of the sun, the angle, the position, and the time. If you know 2, you can calculate the third. So with my sextant, it's no numbers on it, it's nothing. So the first time you're using it, you're calibrating it. You are in a position, you know the longitude and latitude. And you know the time, and you keep watching the horizon. And just when the sun touches the horizon, you time it. And then you know your position and the time. Then you
the lower limb touches the horizon.
Or the high upper or the center, a fixing, And then you can calculate the angle on that. The next time you are at sea, you know it. You know the angle and you know the time. Then you can calculate the position.
Sure.
Maybe I get rich on it, But it was
Did
too
you
late.
get rich on it?
No. I sold a few, Some people are interested. And down in Antarctica, there is now an island called Yrvind Island. You can look at Wikipedia, Yrvind Island.
So how did you get your name?
Well, I tell you, it's a group of mountains and islands and things like that, named after navigational instruments. And my sextant is a navigational instrument. So they call it after me,
That's beautiful, Sven. So how did you get your last name? How did you get the name Yrvind? So I remembered reading about Sven in the 1980s, and at the time, he was going by Sven London.
Oh, Lundin is quite common in Sweden.
That's you. So you were born London?
I'm born Lundin, Sven Lundin. But then, always in a country there, Jonsson or Smith or, common name, there are always some bad people with that name, So in Sweden, it was like one man having an oil company, and he went down to Africa and he killed the natives, and to extract the oil, I didn't want to associate with. And another one was a Nazi man, and I thought, well, that's not good either, So I thought, well, I get my own name, you know. If I do something good, I get credit for it, you know. If I do something bad, people can blame me, you know. On the internet, you know, it's kind of easy to find me. There's no one else with that name.
So just give me a rough idea of on Bris how you navigated during the day with your log line. Explain to people what is a log line?
It's a little propeller, you know. But, you know, after a long time, it started growing on them. You know, the goose barnacles.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So after a month, you know, I pulled it up and it was like very sick because you should really do anti-fouling on them, you know, or have a different one, you know.
I've never heard of that. Wow. Barnacles growing on the log. I've never heard of that.
So I stopped with it, you know. First time I made an ocean passage like 1969, down to Canary Island and then to Brazil. I used the log line. But, you know, I found it really easy to estimate the speed. You know, sometimes it goes quicker, sometimes it goes slower. And, you know, if it's depending on the boat, if it's 3 knots, it's a bit slower. If 4 knots, it's faster, you know. And when you do the running fix, you have to multiply that from the first side to the other side. You have to do the running fix to move it forward, you know. I don't really need that log line, you know.
Then you just used your celestial sights, your paper charts, and your dividers, and just did a running
kind of estimated it. You know, if it goes fast, it's like 110 miles. If it goes slowly, more slow, 80. If it's really slow, it's just 60 miles. And kind of after, you know, a few months, you know, you know the boat, you know how fast you're going. You don't really need this, I think.
So you and Jannike get to Brazil. And then what was the plan from there? Where did you plan to go next?
To around Cape Horn, out in the Pacific. But we stopped in Argentina. Sailed south, 38 degrees south or something like this. But then one day, you know, a wave hit the boat on the side and it capsized. The capsize was in the daytime, you know, and water was coming in through the ventilators and through the hatches, and Jannike hadn't closed a hatch with the tools, you know, tools were thrown around, and my books went straight up to the roof and insulated with styrofoam, and you could see the mark of each book hitting it there, you know. So somehow I got things in order, you know, and kind of fixed the hatches and a water jug, a big one, like 20 liter, got loose, and it was really sitting really wedged down, you know, but it got loose and hit the echo sounder, you know, and broke that, and, well, anyway, I cleared it out. But a week later, got hit by a terrific wind, you know, very strong wind, you know. And I didn't worry so much because, you know, when a wind comes suddenly and hits you hard, you know, it's soon gone. They never last long, you know, a wind like that. But this wind just kept increasing and increasing, you know, and it was really, really blowing very hard. So all the sails come down. I put out a tire, you know, like a drawing, and there's a
to slow you down.
Yes, it's slow. But then the boat pitch pulled. So the stern went over and back, and it kept going like that, you know. And in the evening, I was sitting there back, and I saw from behind a really big wave, and I thought, here we go again, you know. But this boat, Bris, she was really a good, very seaworthy boat, you know. She kind of ride it up, and also the same had happened up north of Scotland, you know, one night it was very dark, and I heard the wind increasing. I thought I must go up and reef down. When I was standing there in front of the mast, I saw a huge breaker coming from behind. And so I thought, this is going to... So I put my legs around the mast, my arms around the mast, and hold on. And then this wave hits, and the boat took off like surfing, And you could see, like rooster tail behind her, And I said, but she went straight. No one at the rudder, no self-steering or anything there. Just straight. And then the wave was gone. And then I finished the reef and went back. When I lay in my bunk, I had pain in my back, So hard I was holding onto the mast, with all my might, So
amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
so she was really good, that boat,
So she didn't broach sideways to the wave?
No, she just tracked, So, but then, after capsizing, pitch bowling, and also with Jannike, I thought, well, I must build a new boat. I started designing a new boat, But this was far away from my mother's basement, So I started heading east with the prevailing winds, And there was this little dot on the map, Tristan da Cunha. I heard that they had a volcano there and that had some people been living there, but I didn't know if there was a harbor or if they had water or people there, But anyway, I headed for it, But there were people living there, and I was lucky to get there in a good day, And so some people came up, and they lifted the boat up. And so they said, "Are you shipwrecked?" "No, we're not shipwrecked. We are trying to find a philosopher, finding out of everything in the world, "Well, you come to the right place," they said, And this is my girlfriend, Jannike. They don't have a harbor there, There's a landing place, So they have open boats that can go up, they put them in the water and go out, and they lift them up, And also my boat was so small, and this landing place it was 3 feet draft, 90 centimeter, so I could get into that landing place and I lift it up, and by chance, they needed a teacher of mathematics.
They got the right person.
Yeah, I was teaching these children mathematics, and they gave me food, and it was very interesting to live there, because they were so isolated, and I was the first boat ever to land there. Yeah, there is no landing place, there's no harbor, So there is a ship 2 times a year, coming with supplies. At that time was a research vessel from South Africa going to Antarctica with things, and they brought things. Also, a passing ship, sometimes from Cape Town, a ship going to, say, Buenos Aires, they bring maid.
Right.
But, that landing place, they could only use it 60 days in a year on average. It could be very calm, but it was breakers.
From the swell.
Swell, like you see on Hawaii or something like that. These big breakers coming in. It could be completely no wind at all,
Tell me about the boats that they took to the out islands, Ascension and Nightingale, I believe are the 2 islands.
Yes.
Why did they go there? They had describe the boats and why they went to those islands.
These boats, they found driftwood. And it was like a canvas canoe. And then they got mail to these islands, They covered the boats with the mail bags and then painted it, making waterproof. And in the springtime, to go there for the penguin eggs, they collect eggs, penguin eggs, and I preserve them. And I think that, I don't know how long, but you can preserve egg a long time, you know. And they make cakes and everything out of these eggs, you know. And then
So they would sail to the islands to get penguin eggs to eat on Tristan da Cunha.
Yeah, penguin eggs, you'd say.
So how did they navigate from
they can
Tristan
see the
da Cunha?
islands, you know. They can see the islands. But, you know, it's like British, you know, and they don't want them to be independent, you know. So they didn't teach them the compass. But I did teach them that, you know.
Really? So wait, let me understand. These islanders that sailed from Tristan da Cunha to these other off-lying islands, they didn't know how to use a compass?
No.
How did you teach them?
I tell you, I showed them the compass, you know. And we was on a field, and I put down a peg there, and I said, this is Nightingale. And look here, this compass is that's the number for that island. And then I put the blanket across their head, you know, so they could only see the compass. And I said, now you walk that direction and keep that number lined up there, you know, like on a compass. And so they understand the principle, you know.
So then they would look at the compass, and if the bearing was, let's say, in real life, Tristan da Cunha was, to get to Ascension was 120 degrees, you would in effect take them out in the field and say, walk 120 degrees and you'll get to this post. Is that
Exactly.
kind of the way it worked?
Yeah.
So Sven, you introduced not only navigation but mathematics to Tristan da Cunha.
And then, but you know, at one time, one man had forgotten his rifle on the island, so they went back to get it. But then the fog came, so they got lost at sea for 5 days. They didn't know what they were. So they didn't have the compasses. Tristan is 2,000 meters high. So it's a really high island. So you can see I think I saw it from 90 miles. So if you're lucky, you can see it, and often it's like a cloud around it too, you know.
So for making landfall with Celestial, you just need to get close and have decent weather, and you could see Tristan.
Yeah, if it's decent weather, you know. But you know, sometimes when I went from Rio de Janeiro to Mar del Plata in Argentina on the Bris, I know I was close, you know, by the sextant, and every hour, you know, I got a new shot of the sun, and I plotted, and we're just like a mile or two away, you know. I couldn't see land, you know, but I kind of heard cars, you know, and then suddenly, you know, like maybe around noon, a bit after noon, I could see 2 big skyscrapers.
Jeez, from the boat, from Bris.
Yes.
God.
And then it was clearing up a bit more, and then I could see the cars driving there, and I could see the beach. And this sometimes happened. This also happened one time I came to Las Palmas in the Canary Islands. You know, it's like mist, you know, you can't see very far.
So describe, this has always fascinated me, Sven, the difference when you've been at sea with GPS, you know where you are, versus the difference being at sea with celestial navigation and finding an island. And I've done both, but how does it feel different to find an island using dead reckoning, celestial navigation, not always knowing? What does that feel like?
I mean, in the trade wind, it's okay, you know, when the sun comes up every day. But for example, when I sailed around Cape Horn, it was in June. And, you know, that's in the middle of the winter.
Yes.
And at noon, the sun is up 11 degrees.
Above the horizon.
At noon, 11 degrees.
So if you held your hand up to the horizon, it wouldn't be much higher than the width of a hand above the horizon.
Exactly. When you get a fix, you want it fixed to be at right angle, if possible. But then, when the sun goes up, they are nearly parallel. And also, down near Cape Horn, strong currents, and sometimes it goes the other way. It can be up to 4 knots, And it's cold, in the winter down there. It's like 56 degrees south,
So would you get ice on the boat?
Not really ice, but snow. You have to stand there, with a sextant. You can't have gloves when you're using a sextant. And you just have to be standing there for long time, and your hands get freezing. And then you can just see this sun coming through the clouds, and you have to be very quick. And the waves are high, and when you got on the top on a wave, the boat kind of heels over, and you have to swim the sextant, So that was the most difficult thing, So, I mean, it's a bit romantic, this with sextants, But I like to be safe,
What are some of the biggest differences sailing 50 years ago that we just don't see anymore? What's one of the biggest changes then versus now?
Well, it was so much fewer boats around, Like, canal 68, no, 69, I was stayed in the Las Palmas in the Canary Islands.
What was it like?
It was just 6, 7 cruising boats there. And 1973, when I came with the first Bris to Madeira, at one time it was just 2 boats. It was just me and another little boat.
And it was a little boat. You say it was not a big boat. It was a little cruising boat.
Yes, it was an Englishman, who'd been building the boat himself, and his girlfriend. So it was also more 20 feet.
So why are people not sailing small boats as much?
Money. Because it's forbidden. There's something called the European Boating Directive, and they made a law. It's forbidden to sell ocean-going boats smaller than like 9-10 meters. I'm not allowed to sell that unless 5 years has passed, because they think no one can make a business building a boat, waiting 5 years, and then selling it. But it was in the 1990, I think this law come in. Because France is the world's biggest producer of recreational boats, sailing boats and things like this. But the boats were cheaper in the U.S., so a lot of people went to the U.S. and bought sailing boats. And European, France, and people, we didn't like that. So we say we must make a law. They didn't say that, but, that's what I did, And we must make it too complicated for the Americans' boat to come here. So we must say they are not safe. We have to have a standard, a security standard, so we can do this. And at the same time, we might as well do a law that's making just bigger boats be production boats. One of my good friends, was in that committee. So each country sent people to this boat builders union, and they make this, and they have this, what they call this, lobbyists, they go to Brussels and say, this is not safe, we have to change this, we need to okay, Bris will say, make up some rules for this as standard. So that took a lot of time to make all these rules, And then I think it was 96 or something like that, in the middle of the 90s, it became a rule. And now they upgrade it every now and then.
So does this explain, because, looking back, I think of so many, and I'm just thinking of the small British sailboats, the Fishers, the Westerlies, the Westerly Nomad, the Kingfisher. These are all boats that are mid 20-foot, and these were offshore boats, like the Fisher
Yes.
25 with a little pilot house. It was a motor sailor, but these boats, you could go anywhere with them. But I don't see them being built now. Is that one of the reasons why?
Yes. And also, I used to write for Cruising World a lot. And I became a friend of the owner and editor, Murray Davis. And he kind of liked me, and he told me many things, And he says, like, more than half the money comes from advertisement. And one time I saw a boat in the Azores. A man, it was an old rusty thing that rugged in, and he had died in the boat because he ran out of food. And I took a picture of it, and I wrote a story about it and sent to Cruising World. They wouldn't publish it.
Why?
It's not good for yachting. No, it should always be happy. No bad things, should never happen. And also, a friend of mine, he wrote for Sail magazine. And they said, do you have any photos? Yeah, sure, we got good photos here. Sorry, we cannot use them. I said, why not? You have no shoes on. Because the Sperry and the dockside, they said, all the photos in the magazines, they must have shoes on.
From Tristan da Cunha, Sven sailed to St. Helena, Guadeloupe, and wound up in Newport, Rhode Island. Newport is home to Cruising World, one of the first magazines dedicated to cruising under sail.
Cruising World was in Newport. So we phoned them. So they came down, and I said, write a story for us. No, I said, I cannot write. I'm dyslexic, I said. I cannot write.
Being an undiagnosed dyslexic in the 1940s was really hard for a kid, even in Sweden.
It was hell. It was pure hell, because it was in the 1940s, and people didn't know about this. And I had a good, nice mother, But first day in school, the teachers started beating me up. I didn't understand, The other children, they saw the teachers beating me. I thought, well, that's fair game. You're going to beat him too. In the breaks, Then the other kids started. But, I was pretty strong, and either you have to give up or you have to fight back. So I fought back, My kind of dyslexia is if I hear a thing, if I got long connections, it's like a tree with long roots, or long communications. So it takes a long time, a lot of energy to learn a new thing. But once, like a tree with long roots, it stands very securely and get nourishment from many ways around, And that's how my mind works, But it takes a long time. So people dyslexic, they're late blossomers, Takes a long time for them to understand. But once it's there, it goes very, very quick, I can work out problems, so quickly. It's incredible, I think I got this from my father, different thinking. I never saw my father. He was a seaman, and 15th of January 1940, he left with the ship, and I never saw him again because the English, they sunk the boat in the Hong Kong, and he died there. I became was a kind of clown in the school, So I made jokes on my test, but they really hated me.
Eventually, Sven graduated high school and joined the Swedish military, which was mandatory at the time.
But then I had to do the military service. The first day I got there, I tried the shoes on. They didn't fit. So I told the man there, this shoes is no good for me, you know. Well, they said, you take what you got, you know. Well, I said, if I'm going to be a good soldier, I need good shoes. Okay, so I deal with you later, you know, but wait. So I kind of came late, you know.
Yeah.
And we should dress up, put on the uniforms, but I was not ready for that. So the sergeant got angry at me, and he started shouting. And then I remember, you know, like the first teacher in this first year in school, you know, beating me, you know. So I started fighting back, you know. And they said, now, airplanes, you know, we have to do drills, you know. Airplanes is coming, throw yourself down in the ditch, you know. I did it, but I did it very, very slowly, you know. And he got more and more angry at me, you know. And then one day we were going to rifle practice, you know. So that was in the 1950s, so we got 6 bullets, you know. And I was being interested in weapons and everything, you know. I had the air gun, and so I aimed well, you know, relaxed, and fired right in the middle, you know. And next shot, right in the middle. To everyone, you know, right in the middle. So then he came with this paper, you know, writing down. So everything right in the middle, I said. And of course he didn't believe me, you know. Speak higher, he said. And I speak lower, you know. I didn't speak higher because he said. And he said, do knee bending. I said, my knees are not good, you know. Well, the doctor has to decide that, you know. So everyone has to stop this, you know. They asked me to the doctor, and he went in and spoke to him. And he came out smiling and looked at me, you know. And then the doctor said, I said, this is not good. And the school doctor had to, it's called morbus laterally. There's like something like that with the knee. You have to be careful, you know. You don't do too much.
It's a condition.
Yeah. So, but he said, you know, you have to lie here in the sick bay, you know. No, it's nothing wrong with me. He said, this is an order, you must lay there. And I was there one day, I was there 2 days, and I understand it was a punishment. So after a few days, you know, I said, this is not in order with the United Nations Condition for Human Rights, you know. So I decided to leave. When the other ones, you know, went to sleep, I opened the window, crawled out, marched over to where we lived, you know, put on my civilian clothes. One of the boys woke up. He go back to sleep, I said. And then I climbed over the fence and hitchhiked up to Stockholm. And then I thought, well, I go abroad. I go down to Germany because my mother sent me there one summer.
So Sven's enjoying his newfound freedom. Everything's going great. He's cruising around. And then he's taken into custody by the authorities for deserting the Swedish military. He goes to a hearing where the judge tells him he's got to report to jail. Sven says, you know, Judge, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's really nice. It's summertime. Can you let me serve my time this winter? And the judge says, okay, that's fine, and turns Sven loose. So Sven's back out on the road. He heads down to Germany. He works as a cook on a boat, hauling a load of Russian nuts to England. He gets to England, and then towards the end of the year, weather starts getting colder, he decides it's time to head back to Sweden to serve his jail time.
And then came December, so I hitched back to Sweden and went to the police station and said, I'm wanted, you know. You can put me into jail now. And then So they wanted to be kind to me. Well, it's Christmas now. We can do it after Christmas if you behave, you know. No, this is what I like. I like to stand there when it's Christmas because the food is better, you know, and the one is kinder. So, and then I came to this prison, you know, the army, and there was not such a serious crime, you know. There was like a prison without walls, you know. You have to stay there. But they wanted me to work. I said, this is not work. This is just in prison. I don't know. I've been to a cinema. I know how prisoners have it. And they said, it's mutiny. Now we're going to put you in the high security area.
No, jeez.
So they took me there to and now they said, no, you're going to meet the worst criminals in the whole Sweden. There are killers, there are dynamiters, there are robbers, everything, you know. You're really making a big mistake, you know. They wanted me to work there too. I said, no, I'm not going to work, you know. So they put me in sedation cell. I said, that's okay, you know. I'm just sitting there thinking about very interesting things, you know. After a while, a week or two, something like that, a nice man come knocking on the door with a white coat, you know, a paper in hand. He said, now you caused us a lot of problems here, you know. You can only have one choice here. You sign this paper, you're a psychopath. Then we let you out. Okay, I said, that's a good deal. But first you have to go live among the psychopaths in this area here, you know. So I did that, and it was interesting people.
And what kind of psychopaths did you meet?
One was a killer, you know. And he was very interesting, very smart, you know. And he was a Nazi. He'd been in the Hitlerjugend, you know. This was not far behind in the war, you know. It was just in 1959, you know. And but then he killed a communist. So it was a political thing, you know. And then was the bank robber. And he was somehow, he didn't like to go to work, you know. But somehow he had to find some money. So he decided to rob banks, you know. He was very quick running. So he chose a bank, you know, and it was like downhill. You couldn't drive there, you know. So got out the bank with the money and run down that hill, you know, and no one could catch him.
Nobody could catch him.
But anyway, he got caught after a while, you know. He was not very practical, you know.
So what did you learn from a psychopath?
Well, it was very interesting, especially this man, you know, who was a Nazi. He was a very smart man, you know. And he taught me many things about books and philosophy. Yeah, he was a very educated man, you know. But then, you see, as a psychopath, at that time, you know, I was also thinking about the society, you know. Everyone wants to make money and like building bigger boats, not only boats, you know, but making on the stock markets, and I didn't think it was a good thing. And most people, you know, they work on a factory, like, you know, Ford, they just do nuts and things like that. No, and I could never get the education. I realized that, you know. So I decided to, like, cutting out a little bit of the story, man, you know, but start living on a small boat, because I'm born on a small island in a house just 50 meters from the water. And to do the shopping, I just have to row across the water in the next island to buy food. So I know how to handle small boats, and I just thought, I got a little boat, and I make a little house on that. And then I can sail to a town and go to the library, read somehow I can get a little bit money to live on, and then I sailed south, and then I ended up in Copenhagen. Then one day I walked around in Newport, and I saw Seaman's library. Said, interesting, because I already also this man in the prison near to me, the killer. He said, Sven, never do as me. never rush a thing. Every time you got a problem, go to the library, read a book. There's books about everything, and it's the smartest people in the world who's written these books. So, for example, he said, if you want to learn French, there is a book about learning French. If you want to build a radio transmitter, there's a book about to build a radio transmitter. If you want to know about life after death, there's a book about that too. Yeah. So I went to this Seaman's library, the Danish Merchant Navy. They supply them with books. And I think the man in charge of this, he must be very interested in books because they had all kinds of very interesting books, So I came there every day, sitting there reading these books about books. And in the end, I realized that I must learn more mathematics because this is about yacht design and things like that. Mathematics comes into that. And I needed to know calculus.
So Sven hunkered down at the Seaman's library, and he studied mathematics, engineering, and then he sat in on lectures at a nearby university. Over time, he learned enough about math and sailboats to actually design his own sailboats. At the same time, he spent his summers sailing on very small boats he fixed up and cruised, sometimes alone and sometimes with a friend. And then, in his early 30s, as he told us earlier, he built his first sailboat from scratch in his mom's basement. So to jump the story forward, Sven arrives in Newport, Rhode Island on Bris, having just taken this incredible voyage from Sweden to South America, to Tristan da Cunha through the Caribbean. And they're like, hey, write us an article. And Sven's like, well, I really don't write well. I'm a dyslexic. And this really, really bugged Sven, that after this extraordinary experience he just had on Bris, the boat he designed and built himself, he wasn't able to translate that experience into an article that could be published in Cruising World.
So I can't write anything like that. But then I said, do like you write a letter to your mother, tell him what's happening. And then at the office, we got editors. They fix everything, Well, I said, and you get paid. I thought, but there must only be 1,500 words, they said. Because, article has to go in the magazine. There's space for that. Okay, so I started writing. But soon I ran out of this 1,500 words, So I phoned her, I said, I ran out of the 15. You have to cut, she said. Well,
No!
I already cut. I already did that. Well, no problem, she said. I come down. I do the cutting, she said. So she came down, was a good. Started reading. This is good writing, she said. She read a bit more. She looked at me. I think she got the future as a writer, she said.
Wow.
What we do is come back to the office in the afternoon, and we make this into a series, because this Cruising World comes out every month. So I started writing first, and then second, third, and then when the third was gone, they wanted more, And
So that's how it started.
That's how it started. And they read it in France, and they wrote to me from France, because they got first North American rights. So I just tear these pages out and send them a letter to France. I got paid once again.
How did you get home? How did the trip end?
There were many parties, and one day I got to that party, and there was one man called Dick Newick. Another man there was called Tom Follett.
Dick Newick is a multi-hull designer, and Tom Follett was a sailor who won a race across the Atlantic Ocean in 1968 aboard one of Dick Newick's multi-hulls.
He been at this marina. I knocked at the boat, and I read this book by Dick Newick about shears, And I said, go down, and I looked there. And then later I found out, he said to Dick Newick, he was on Martha's Vineyard building boats. Dick, he said, you need a man like Sven to help you build the boats. You know? So I met Dick at the party, and then Dick said, Sven, wouldn't you like to come and work for me on Martha's Vineyard? And it's not far from Newport. Oh, yes, because I'd read his book, you know, I was very interested in these things, you know. And I've been a member of the Amateur Yacht Research Society also in the 1960s, you know. So I know about many of those things. So I came there, worked there for nearly 1 year. And then in March, I sailed back to Sweden. I started sailing. Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, I sailed to Azores, Horta in Azores. From Azores, I sailed to England, from England to Sweden. And you know, the North Atlantic can be rough. So the boat capsized it once again, you know. And then I started building the aluminum boat. At that time, I had very little money. I had $3 when I came to the US. And when I came to Sweden, I had about $5, you know, or 10. So, but then there was a lot of interest in these things because not many been sailing at that time, and I've been to Capsized and Pittsburgh, I've been to Tristan da Cunha, I've been to the US, you know, and so the media was writing about me, and I was on TV on this, and then the sailmaker, he given me the sails for free. He said, now we're going to have a big party, and we'd like you to come there and give a talk. Yes, I said. And so I gave a talk, and everyone was happy. And then afterward, he gave me 500 kroner, which is quite a... Now I say, I cannot take any money from you. You gave me the sails. So that's more than enough, you know. No, you take the money, said. No, I said. You said. And then I took the money.
So how much would 500 kroner be now?
Yeah, like now it's like $2,000 or something like that.
Real money?
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, especially if you don't have anything, you know.
Yeah, to go from $5 to $2,000 is a big jump.
Yeah. So then I started thinking, and then more other people asking, couldn't you come and give a talk, like yacht clubs and things like that? Yes. And how much do you want? I said 500, I said, because that's what you're giving me. And then more people come, and I thought, well, I could take a bit more, I thought, you know, because more people ask. And then I made a lot of money, you know, well, for my standard, you know.
Giving presentations about the Bris voyage.
Yes, so from 1976 to 96 about, I've been living on that. And also I've been writing 6 books, you know. So, but now it's going downhill, you know. But now, upcoming voyage, you know, when I get to New Zealand, I think I'm getting better again, you know.
Yeah, so tell me about your upcoming voyage, your new boat. How long is it? The name, the new thought, the changes. What's different?
I designed 35 years ago, and with help of some a yacht designer in Göteborg, and I sold some drawings, you know, and maybe 10 or 20 boats were built. And they were built very good, you know, with the vinyl and epoxy and polyester fiber. It's the same as you have in sail clothes, you know. About a year ago, September last year, I saw there is some, you can look at the internet and see boats for sale, you know. And that was Bris 2,000 kroner, it says. I said, I cannot buy this, you know. But at least I can phone and speak to him a bit. So I did for 2,000 kroner is like very little for such a good boat, you know. And no one understands it. So I phoned him. Okay, I said, I was thinking quickly. I send you 10,000 kroner and you come down with the boat here. So I bought it. And that's what I'm working on.
So the current boat you have now is a boat that is by your design, that you're in effect updating or restoring for your next voyage?
So the plan is to doing it, this boat, and then take it on a trailer to Ireland, Dingley in Ireland, and then sail down to Madeira, and then make a real long voyage from Madeira. It's like 14,000 miles, sailing south of Africa, south of Australia, and to Dunedin in New Zealand. And usually this cannot be done, but I study a lot. I'm reading about nutrition. So I have almond meal, and I had egg yolk powder, and I have milk powder, and then I'm going to have sardines. I'm going to have 500 sardines. And then I'm going to collect rainwater, because my boom's now going to be a rainwater collector. So when it's rain, it fall in the boom, it runs down, rains into a jerry can. And I've been studying this now, reading about, and about 15% of the time it rains down in the Roaring Forties. 15%.
Because water's heavy. It would be too heavy to carry that much water in a boat that size.
So I will have about 70 liters water. I drink about 1 liter water a day. So 70 liters water would keep me for about 2 months,
And so as you drink the water on this voyage, do you have to replace it to keep the ballast for weight? Do you rely on the water for ballast?
No, I got 150 kilo ballast keel.
Like lead ballast keel.
No, it's bronze.
Bronze ballast keel. Okay. Why Dunedin in New Zealand as opposed to other cities?
When I get to New Zealand, I will write a letter to Brussels, EU, and say that I have to change the law.
About boats.
Decriminalize the boats, because it's not unsafe,
That's right.
And it's as far as you can get, from Sweden.
That's lovely. That's lovely, Sven. So what do you believe now that you didn't believe when you were young?
Well, it's about the same. I always been thinking I could do anything, I've always been very positive, so I've been thinking positive. But of course I learned more facts, I know how more skills, For example, I can work with epoxy and all these things, I got a lot of practical knowledge and a lot of theoretical knowledge, and I can speak English, I can speak German, I can speak French, a little bit Spanish, things like this. So I learned a lot, and I can write now.
So how old are you now, Sven?
86.
How do you stay in such good shape?
Well, I never been drinking, I never been smoking, and also I got a positive mental attitude to everything. And I eat healthy. I eat once a day, and about 4 times a year, I fast, like a long fast for 3-4 days, maybe 2 weeks,
How do those long fasts help you?
Insulin is very dangerous, and you get Alzheimer and things like this. Have you heard about autophagy?
No.
When you're fasting, the body runs out of sugar or carbohydrates. It starts burning fat. But it needs more things, And it's like in the workshop, when you run out of wood, ordinary good wood, there is 2 pieces there. Maybe I can put them together and make a longer piece of them. So it's a lot of small proteins in the body, like skin and things like this. Now the body takes that and I put them together, make new proteins, and Have you heard about mitochondria?
Yes, I have, but explain it again.
It's what's make this ATP, what's make this energy currency, in the body. But also when they do that, they use oxygen, and oxygen kind of destroys them, it's dangerous. But now, when you're fasting, now we have to be careful. The body makes new ones, and they clean out the cells, but this fasting, it's been around for thousands of years, People always knew that this kind of cleans out the body and makes help. But now, I think 2016, there was a Japanese professor who got Nobel Prize for his autophagy. So now they got the scientific basis for it too. And also exercise. I run half an hour every day. And I do this, what you call it, chin-ups or something, row rings and, some exercises and, And also on my bicycle, 1 hour every day. I bike to workshop. I bike back to lunchtime. Now I run, I eat, I do the exercises, I bike back, I work in the evening. But the most important thing is that if you have an aim, if there is something really you want to do. So now I want to finish this boat and this project, but I also want to find out how everything works,
On the boat, on these really long passages, what do you do to keep your muscles from atrophying?
Well, the boat keeps moving too. It keeps constantly moving. Body is very adaptable. So the upper body will get stronger, the leg will get weaker, but I will do a little bit exercises now.
And what is it like when you come to shore? What does land feel like when you've been out on a boat for 60, 70 days?
Nowadays, I use a stick in the first week,
Why do you use a stick?
Oh, because my legs are weak, after like 78 days not using my leg muscles, they got weak. But on the other hand, the body is wonderful because it rebuilds it, That's efficiency. If you don't use it, you lose it. And that's how it should be.
Why do you prefer a rope to hold up your pants instead of a belt?
It's very simple, rope is all around, it's simple. And you don't need to have the hose as continuous, you can stretch as much as you like.
That's elegant. I like that. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I think the important thing is to have something to live for in life. To have something to live for, that's the important thing. That keeps you healthy, and keeps your brain working, So like every day I work on the boats, so I have all these little problems, so evening I look at it, I say, well, that's a good thing, and then bike back, in the evening, and when out running, I think how to do this, how to do that, and so it kind of occupied all the time, and if you're not doing that, you rot away, You have to have a purpose. That's the thing.
That was Sven Yrvind. To follow his current build and upcoming voyage, find him at yrvind.com. That's YRVIND.com. His YouTube channel is Sven Yrvind. For more stories of long riders, sailors, ramblers, adventurers, and dreamers finding their way, visit travelgrit.com. If you enjoyed this episode of the Travel Grit podcast, please leave a review on whatever platform you listen to it on. If you've already left a review, thank you so much. Your review really helps get the word out about Travel Grit. Until we catch up again, stay gritty. Travel Grit. Conversations with ramblers, roamers, and free spirits.